There's a huge question here, a very simple matter, I suppose, which is, are we allowed to ask questions? Are we allowed to ask questions? You know, one of the saddest things about the people who are coming out now and, you know, they're going to the media or they're going elsewhere to tell their stories about their relatives who have died. They say they're beset by a sense of guilt that they didn't ask enough questions. They didn't ask enough questions. We pay Paul Reed, he's the CEO of the HSE. We pay Paul Reed €350,000 a year. That is his salary, €350,000 a year, more or less the same as the President of the United States. That is what the head of the HSE is getting. And the tale after tale after tale of people who have lost loved ones is that when they did ask questions, when they did look for some clarity on just what was happening in those nursing homes, what was happening to their loved ones, what was happening in the COVID ward, they met a blank wall.
The people who at the very outset, all of this lockdown, all of these measures were all being put in place to protect, those same people were being booted off the test and were being subjected to transfers from hospital without testing. And we couldn't get them oxygen, we couldn't get them end-of-life medication. To tell doctors that, you know, you can manage patients without having an appropriate diagnosis for them or without allowing them, the very people who the whole kind of process was to protect, you know, to put them so low down the priority list that they're actually so low down they get booted off the bloody waiting list. There's something morally, ethically, medically, scientifically, on whatever level you want to put it at, there's something seriously wrong with how these people are being valued and considered in society.
It may not be seen or reflected in the mainstream media, but we've seen an uproar around the treatment of our elderly people in nursing homes. We've seen an uproar around what is happening in COVID-19 wards all around the country, from Dublin to Dundalk to Mullingar. We have had needless deaths. I don't use that lightly. We have had needless deaths. The situation in Dalgan House in Dundalk that can only be described as horrific, where we have 23 or 24 people dying in one nursing home.
This systematic shutdown of our health service, with a blanket shutdown, this is completely wrong, and there will be big medical consequences. And I'm disappointed that GPs and other doctors in my profession aren't speaking up on behalf of women and their smears and their breast checks, and men and prostate cancer, you know. So this stuff getting swept along with the lockdown, getting brushed into the lockdown, oh my God, we're all doing a fantastic job and this is all really wonderful. That really has to stop, and people do have to start asking questions.
We have cases of the wrong bodies being buried in Mullingar. Horrific scenes, horrific. They should never happen in a civilized country. I think we're getting used to something here that is just horrific, should never be normal, should never be normalized in a civilized country.
We've had the highest number, with 60% of the deaths in Ireland, in the region of 60%, have been nursing home residents, and a huge number of those were certainly avoidable. Those two issues, what's coming down the line in terms of our cancelled or shut down health service and the deaths that have occurred, those two things, ministers, advisors need to be standing up and answering those questions, and they're not even being asked those questions.
When we start talking about the data that goes into the modeling, we have to ask ourselves a question. Are we being forthright? Are we sharing with the public? We want to know what's going into your modeling.
ER doctors now, my friends that I talk to say, you know, it's interesting, when I'm writing up my death report, I'm being pressured to add COVID. Why is that? Why are we being pressured to add COVID to maybe increase the numbers and make it look a little bit worse than it is? I think so.
So with that being said, why would they want to skew the number of deaths due to COVID-19?
Well, fear is a great way to control people, and I worry about that. I worry that sometimes we're so darn interested in just jazzing up the fear factor.
I think it's fear. Society is afraid. It's been scared totally by governments at the beginning of it, not just the British government, all across the board.
This virus has been every bit as deadly and destructive as was feared.
Except that it hasn't been. Take a look back at what Leo Varadkar told the country on March the 17th.
I think everyone will understand at this stage that there will be an exponential increase in the number of cases in the coming days and weeks. Increases of roughly 30% in the number of cases every day. That is inevitable. That cannot be stopped. We're at the very start of that curve that people are starting to become familiar with.
Those were his words. That is inevitable. That cannot be stopped. So if the cases did increase by 30% every day, like the government said they would, we would have been in a situation on April the 12th where we would have had 600,000 cases of the coronavirus. But how many cases did we have on April the 12th? We had 9,000 cases, and probably a lot less than that because we're told they recover after 2 weeks. That's 0.015% of the government's prediction. The government's prediction that they said was inevitable. Now, some people will say, oh, the figures are lower because of the lockdown. They're lower because of the government measures. That doesn't really make any sense because the government announced these predictions days after the schools had been closed and days after the government had rolled out social distancing. And of course, not to forget that Leo Varadkar told us that these predictions were inevitable, that they could not be stopped, no matter what we did. So on the basis of these wildly inaccurate figures, we have locked down the country, we have devastated the economy, countless businesses around the country, small businesses, family businesses facing extinction. We have suspended the most basic civil liberties. We have elderly people around the country facing the awful prospect of their lives ending without having their loved ones by their side. So the basic question here is, why is no one asking the government why their predictions were so wildly inaccurate?
I looked at the phased lifting of the lockdown, and it's very interesting. You can kind of read between the lines. If you go onto the government.ie website and you look at the kind of the language that's used, to move from phase 1 to phase 2, it's kind of, if we do a good job and if we're doing very well and if everything is going well. Well, newsflash, the coronavirus is passing. It's more than likely a seasonal virus. It's following the pattern. It is passing out of all the countries as we speak. It is passing.
So in almost every context, we've seen the epidemic grow, turn around and die away, almost like clockwork. And various countries have had different countries have had different lockdown policies. And yet what we've observed is almost a uniform kind of pattern of behavior, which is highly consistent with the SIR model. To me, that suggests that much of the driving force here was due to the build-up of immunity. I think that's a more parsimonious explanation than one which requires in every country for lockdown or varying degrees of lockdown, including no lockdown, to have had the same effect.
This term herd immunity, I don't think there's ever been a bigger blunder in the history of medical nomenclature than this terminology, herd immunity. As soon as that phrase came onto the table as being something that the governments could either cause or promote or encourage or whatever, it was doomed to failure, because I'm not an animal, I'm not a pig or a cow or a member of a herd, and I'm not going to be treated like the member of a herd. And then it's gone. The whole concept of herd immunity, just simply because it's called herd immunity, is gone. You know, people go bananas as soon as they hear it. You know, they think they're being called animals and pigs and that sort of thing. If it was called natural immunity, we'd probably have a completely different lockdown process and a completely different version of the lockdown in so many different countries. But that bloody word, herd, has done so much fucking damage to science, scientific approach, to the rational kind of look at things. Because, I mean, what is herd immunity?
We understand microbiology, we understand immunology, and we want strong immune systems. I don't want to hide in my home, develop a weak immune system, and then come out and get disease.
What herd immunity is, it simply refers to people, when they come into contact with coronavirus, their immune system clears the virus, as it does for the 90% of the people who come into contact with the virus. They clear it, and they have a degree of immunity. And those people, us, we the people, we are part of the herd that we live in, our society. We are immune. And the more of us that become progressively immune to the virus, the harder it is for the virus to jump around in society, to spread.
Do you think there's any chance that we might actually have done better had we done nothing at all?
Yes, I think there's a chance we might have done better by doing nothing at all, or at least doing something different, which would have been to protect the vulnerable, to pay attention to protecting the vulnerable. Remaining in a state of lockdown is also one which I think is extremely dangerous from the point of view of the vulnerability of the entire population to new pathogens.
The more of us that become progressively immune to the virus, the harder it is for the virus to jump around in society, to spread. So Mother Nature's immunity for population, it's herd immunity, it's not herd immunity, it's Mother Nature's immunity. And it's a natural part of the process.